Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Between the Ears. I'm Schuyler, and joined with me again today is Christopher Hall. Yesterday, we broke down the West Virginia offense, what we can expect from that side of the ball. Today, we're diving into the defensive side and Jordan Leslie. Chris, last year, let's just be honest, it was a train wreck. It spiraled out of control. Really, when Charles Woods went down, who's now obviously not here anymore, he transferred out of the program, but seemed like that injury kind of was a snowball effect or a domino effect, if you will, for a lot of miscommunication, guys playing out of position in the back end of that defense, and felt like they never really found their footing until late in the year where they won two of the last three games. I guess just from a personnel standpoint, what do you like about this defense, or do you not like about this defense?
Well, I think they didn't have a lot of depth last year, so you kind of just touched on that with the defensive backs. But I think they have more depth this year, so I think that's put one in the pro column for them. But I think, what I still don't like about this defense is they still seem undersized in the box. Now, just talking about corners, they've got length, they've got speed. They are bigger on the outside, so I think that's positive. You always hear them talk about length and get to the ball quicker. You have that little bit of reach. It definitely helps. But they're still unproven. I know Beanie Bishop comes from Minnesota. He was just kind of in a different scheme than where he was at Western Kentucky, so he didn't have the production. But it's still an unproven lot back there. So when you kind of look at them at a whole, that's kind of what you can say about a lot of them. You have the names like Lee Koba. It's amazing that he was able to get bigger off what he was last year, physically bigger. Like, kid's just a monster. But I think some of the surprise is really from the defensive line. I know we talked about it going into camp. You're not going to have a Stills along the defensive front. It's been the first time for 2017 or whatever it was. Been a while not have not an All American up there. So I think that's a plus. It's not that they have a Dante Stills, but they have more depth. So being able to rotate, you still like to see some more size up front, but we'll kind of have to see. I think they're maybe more athletic than they have been in years past as a whole. So maybe that kind of makes up for just being able to rotate guys, keeping them fresh, being able to use their athleticism to get in the backfield.
So let's start with the the defensive line. We'll work our way back. You kind of mentioned it there briefly. No Dante Stills. First time in a while that there's not a Stills brother up there. The one guy that I've kind of heard about a lot in fall camp, or maybe it's just because I was watching the video the other day, but is Eddie V. I feel like we're on the verge of an Eddie V outburst. I don't know why that is. It seems like the coaching staff really loves the way he takes to coaching and how fundamentally sound he's kind of become since arriving here. Because obviously, when he played overseas, it was a completely different type of game. But it feels like we're on the verge of an outburst from Eddie V. You've got other guys up there like Fatorma Mulba, who's a Penn State transfer, has been a pleasant surprise. Just talk about that mix up front. Do you see anybody really stepping up as kind of the alpha? I mean, maybe it's a Sean Martin who had 4 sacks last year, but is there an alpha along that group, or is it going to be they have to be strong by committee?
Yeah, I think it's really going to have to be by committee. Lockhart's come a long way from last year. He can kind of be that guy
Damon
that sets
Russell
the
too.
tone. So yeah, sets the tone right in the middle. Eddie V, they really do like him. I think it's maybe a year early before we see, that kind of breakout season, which you kind of expect. Get a season under his belt. I'll let him get comfortable, but he may really start get going and later in the year. And don't forget Jalen Thornton, who's been in the program for quite some time now. They've definitely liked him since he was a freshman. He's finally starting to get the reps he needs to be able to be a rotation guy. So Sean Martin is definitely that dude. He's had to battle, really coming off that injury throughout from last year into this year. So haven't got to see a lot of Sean Martin, but yeah, I think Sean Martin definitely can be that guy. Uh, may get a slow start since he hasn't really got to go full at a lot of the scrimmages, but he can definitely be that guy up front. And I like Tor Simmons as well being up there in the mix, just because another program veteran knows how to be in an atmosphere. Another guy that can kind of settle things down, maybe late in the fourth quarter, and still make plays for you. So, to me, it's really going to be by committee. You could see maybe a hot hand And it's really, I think, with a lot of this team this year, just because they had so much turnover after COVID, and these are a lot of young guys coming up, a lot of unproven talent right now. It's kind of a wait and see. But when you kind of look going into the season, you kind of can lean on a Mike Lockhart and a Sean Martin, who's just physically gifted. Those are the guys kind of lean on. Those are the guys going into the season. Like, all right, these are the guys that's got to set the tone. Game one at Penn State. Let's see what happens. And I think it was Neil this week when he's talking about the defensive line, how they have gone up against this offensive line. It always makes you worry a little bit. Is the offensive line
Yeah.
taking a step back possibly? I doubt it, but it makes you worry. But so that maybe is a good sign for this group. Just the fact that they again can rotate two or three units out there and keep them fresh. They can continue to use their athleticism because they're not very big when you're talking about the rest of the Big 12. So if they can keep their speed up, especially in that fourth quarter, and all of a sudden you put Mike Lockhart back out there and he's fresh in the fourth quarter, that could go a long way. So going into the season, I don't think West Virginia had the depth. I think that was a big concern. Like, all right, these guys are small. They're not going to be able to hold on to it to fourth quarter. But now you're looking at like, okay, now they may have enough depth to get you through the season.
Yeah, so there's one thing I want to point out before I ask you another question about the D line is I think even though there is a lot of new faces up there, you're placing three starters along that D line. The good thing is it's not like these guys are just now being thrown into starting roles. Like they have played a little bit, whether it was here or somewhere else. So I don't think that an Eddie Vestorinen or a Sean Martin or a Mike Lockhart or even a Hammond Russell and obviously Fatorma Mulba, who will be going back to his old school next week. I don't think any of them are going to be like deers in the headlight when they go to Penn State and there are 110,000 people in there. Well, number one, because it's going to be quiet when they're off the field, but still, I don't think that there's going to be that nervousness or that pressure from those guys because they have played in those crazy atmospheres before. They just did it last year with the Pitt Virginia Tech game. So along that defensive line, there's three transfers. You got Tommy Waderjai from Kentucky, who they were hard after out of high school. You have Mobile, who we mentioned a couple times, and then Day Hawkins, who's a transfer from Tennessee State. Of those three, do you feel like any of them will kind of separate themselves as one of the key impact guys on along that front, or is it too early to tell?
It's really too early to tell, but if you kind of look at who's in front and kind of the rotation again, you kind of look at Day, extremely athletic kid. So I think that if he could probably get his name called earlier than the other two, just looking at who's in front of him. But yeah, I mean when you're talking about Moba, yeah, I mean he can definitely make an impact. That
He's a big
that no,
boy.
no, yeah, that nose tag, that's somebody. Hey, go lean on them in the second, third quarter. All right, Mike, go in there and get around them. So yeah, that's somebody that can definitely lean on the defense, and I 100% think he's going to play a lot of snaps. But at the same time, I think so much of it, especially in the Big 12, there's so many different offenses. You go to Penn State, it's going to be a heavy run where you see a lot of Mike Lockhart, where you see a lot of Milba. Who you going to see, how they're going to attack it. I think so much of it is really just going to come to how they're game planning for that week.
One of the biggest things about this defense, I think, that maybe not everyone is thinking about, but they need a big time season from Jared Bartlett. Okay, like this kid has been really good, really since he was a freshman, and has kind of slowly and steadily got better. But he's a guy that they've been almost waiting on to just absolutely blow up, and it just hasn't happened yet. When you lose the production that they lost along the defensive line last year, you're losing that pass rush. I feel like they're leaning on the Bandit position this year with Jared Bartlett, Tyron Bradley, and the true freshman James Hurd Jr. to kind of generate that pass rush. I mean, are you kind of getting that same feeling like this has got to be where that pass rush comes from? Because there's guys up front on the defensive line. I don't know that there's a true pass rusher there. One may emerge. Sean Martin may be a decent pass rusher, but I don't get the sense that he's that guy that maybe Dante Stills was.
Yeah, I mean, they're really looking for more. I mean, they've been looking for production out of that position the entire time they've been here. And really, this has to be one of those years that they've got to get it. They have to find that production. They've got to create some pressure in the backfield from that position. So yeah, they're going to lean on Bartlett. He has all the tools. Just trying, something that they've lacked in every position the last few years is consistency. Just got to be consistent. He had those 4 sacks against Virginia Tech a couple years ago. He's shown that he can do it. Just got to be consistent. Yeah, he can be that guy. He might be up there in double digit sack range this year. It's just another kid that's been in the program. It's just time for him to take that next step. For him, it's going to be a big step. If they can get 7, 8 sacks out of him, I think that's a good year. But I think they're really pushing him to get 10, 11 sacks that year. And it's also a position as well that, the staff, and you can see it with your own eyes that it's the biggest they've been all since they've been here. It's the
Yep.
body type that they want, or they all look kind of similar body size wise. So they're really starting, after years of trying, really starting to get the body types they want at each position. And that's one of them. Bartlett's been here long enough that he knows the scheme. And I think with everything that's kind of shaped up on the front and back end, he really could be set up for a good season.
I mean, if you think back to Neil and that whole defensive staff and their success at Troy, it was a lot of because of that position, the bandit position. They got a lot of production out of that, and they really haven't had that here. But I think you could attribute that some to the body types that they've had, maybe the skill sets they've had at that position. They've kind of had almost different guys playing there. I mean, Jared Bartlett's been a mainstay there, but behind him and when you rotate in other guys, it's kind of been a mixture of different skill sets and heights and weights and all that stuff. So I think you're starting to see some consistency there with what they want. It's been what they've been wanting. They just haven't been able to get those bodies and those skill sets into this building. So um, moving to the linebackers, I feel like this is the biggest question mark. And I know people will say I'm crazy because they probably should be the cornerback spot or the safeties, but to me, it's the linebackers because Lee Koba, I think, can be as good as anybody in this league. I really do. But for me, it's a consistency thing. Can he be good enough in pass coverage? That's something that he was kind of struggling in a year ago. And you obviously have the big question mark at will linebacker. And Spear, they're moving Lance Dixon over there. He played Will last year. They've talked about the idea of moving him back to Will if somebody doesn't emerge as the starter there. I mean, what's your sense on the linebackers? Is there valid reason to be concerned about the depth at that position and or at that level of the defense and even the starters?
Yeah, this is another area where you have a lot of unproven talent. But I think with the linebackers, there's enough skill there that they've really just kind of moved guys around. And I think it's another area where it's going to be who starts is who they're playing against, what skill sets fit their needs. So it's obviously concerning. You want your middle linebacker, you want your will, uh, and you want the bandit. You want all those to be the similar communication problems, but I think there's enough veterans there at this point that it's not too big of a concern what they can kind of do with Anthony Wilson on the back end and some of the guys they've picked up from the safeties can kind of help them, especially in pass coverage. And that's kind of with that bandit as well. That's something that, they've really had to work on in that position at pass coverage. Like when they're in there, they reliability. So it's kind of the same thing with Cobra. It's something he had to work on. So I think just kind of the way they're going to match things up, I think they can not necessarily hide their weaknesses, but really use their strengths in a lot of different areas. Because when you talk about Lance Dixon and some of these guys that've been here for a while, they've all played multiple positions. Most of these guys all rotate within those linebackers. So it's really, again, I think it's a lot of it's just going to be who they face that week. Koba's going to be in the middle, without a doubt. He will be in the middle, but really some of it, you may only have 2 linebackers. It may be really only 4-2. That's it. You may just have an extra safety in there at times. So I think a lot of it, quite frankly, is who does step up at will, who is going to be that will linebacker. It's going into the final week before they make that decision. So I don't think there's a lot of confidence in it as far as, hey, this is going to be our whoever wins the starting job, that's going to be the starter all year.
Yeah.
I think it might be fluid, and again, some of it may just be scheme wise.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll talk earlier this week that like that's a position they've been putting a lot of stress on, and I think that's the second or third time he's mentioned that in fall camp. That's another reason why I'm kind of concerned about it because it just seems like they don't on paper they didn't have the depth, and now that you're hearing some of these things, that you're hearing the concerns, it definitely raised the eyebrows a little bit. But I mean, with the will spot, I mean, you have Jai Favris, who's really not played a whole lot of defensive football. You have Trey Lathan, who, in my opinion, was one of the top recruits in that recruiting class that he came in, but he's still trying to figure things out. So a lot does depend on that position. And a lot does depend on Tyreek Austin Cave as the backup to Lee Koba at the mic. How can he push not to overtake Koba at the starting position, but to just push to get on the field, push to get Lee Koba some reps off the field, and then again at Spear, it's kind of a mixed bag of, you got some different body types there. Lance Dixon, Hershey McLaurin, Raleigh Collins. Can those guys step up to form some sort of rotation? I know Neil talked about Lance Dixon needing to take that step. So a lot of question marks at linebacker. One spot, in my opinion, where there's not a whole lot of question marks, and you may disagree, is that cornerback room. You got Andrew Wilson Lamb and Malachi Ruffin. They're coming back. Jacoby Spell's coming back. They add Montre Miller from Kent State, Beanie Bishop from Minnesota. I'm really high on Beanie Bishop. I really like that kid a lot. I think that he's going to add a lot. Montre Miller, I'm kind of up in the air on. But interestingly, on the preseason depth chart, now again, this was before fall camp, this was back in Big 12 media time, there was Eers listed at both of these positions. Do you feel like there's been a starter that has emerged at either side of the field for those two spots?
Um, Not really. I think they may lean heavy. I think they may lean on some veterans there, but I really do like. I've liked Andrew Wilson Lamp since he arrived, um, just because of his size and his speed. He looks a little bigger. I think he's gained 20 pounds of muscle, but he's so tall that it just doesn't kind of look like it. But I think that's a kid that really could. That if you're looking at a player that hasn't had a lot of production while he's been in Morgantown, that's to me is the kid that could have the breakout season. He's come on at times when he was called on last year earlier than probably that they wanted to. He stepped up at times. So him and Malachi, he's been a great story this year. He's overcome a lot. So I don't know if there's necessarily again kind of like these defensive linemen. I don't know if there's that dog. I don't know if there's that go-to guy that hey you go shut down their best wide receiver. I don't think they have that. That's yet to be seen. But we'll see. I do think all the guys on that depth chart are more than capable of getting the job done. You're definitely going to see a heavy rotation. I definitely like Jacoby Spells as well. Really liked the way he came on the end of last year, and I think that's another kid that he's probably going to get burned at times because he's still so young. But I think he's probably going to make more plays than not when it's all said and done. So I think learning under somebody like Beanie Bishop and Malachi Ruffin, Montre Miller coming out, I think players like that for Jacoby, and then even like Andrew Wilson Lamb, someone that was a receiver and transitioning to a cornerback this whole time. He's been here for a while. I think he's got a lot to learn from, and I think right there in heavy rotation, I think that kid he may be really good by the time it's all said and done. That may be another kid by the end of the season, like someone to be excited about going into next year.
Yeah, that's the key thing right there. Patience. Be patient with these young corners, Jacoby Spells and Andrew Wilson Lamb, because they've got really good talent. They're really talented players. I think they could even emerge into being all league type players before they graduate. But last year they were kind of thrown into the fire. They weren't really supposed to be on the field when they were. They really were fed to the wolves. They didn't have really much of a choice because of the injuries and all that stuff. But this is really that first year where they're expected to have a significant role, whether it's as a starter or as a rotational guy. So be patient. I still think you're going to see some flashes in a pan of excellence. You're probably going to see some boneheaded moments as well. But I think when we get to that month of November, that's when you really want to see those two guys turn the corner, play more consistent, not have those boneheaded plays pop up as much. And if they do, then all of a sudden you've got something cooking there. So move into the last part of this defense here. We all know about Aubrey Burks. Everybody knows about Aubrey Burks. All league player, preseason guy. Um, I think he's an NFL talent. What else does West Virginia have in that room? They got Keyshawn Cobb. They brought in from Buffalo. They bring in Anthony Wilson from Georgia Southern. Marcus Floyd is back. Christian Stokes is kind of in there in the mix, redshirt freshman. I'm a big Anthony Wilson fan. I know he's small. I know he's tiny, but that kid can pack a punch. Um, what do you think of this safety group? I mean, outside of Aubrey Burks, do you feel like there's enough there?
Yeah, I think there's plenty there. Marcus Floyd has played well since he's been there. There's another one that's really developed
And he's not
since he's
bouncing
been
around
in.
as much.
No, he's really developed, and yeah, Anthony Wilson, he's a hard hitter. His favorite player is Carl Joseph. Like, so he came to West Virginia. That's why he's at West Virginia. So if you're a big Carl Joseph fan, expect Anthony Wilson to emulate it within the rules. Now, obviously, he can't go head hunting like Carl
No
Joseph did, but
Oklahoma hit.
playing within the rules. But yeah, I like this bunch. I like these safeties. I think that there's another unit that you could be multiple with. And you can really kind of rotate guys in and out. I know they're using some of the safeties and corners. I think as a whole, overall, when you're looking at the secondary, this is a group that can probably confuse some teams, especially some younger quarterbacks, where they can start rotating. You can start moving Anthony Wilson over to maybe the corner or nickel, and then you start kind of piecing guys around. When the quarterback goes to look to try to recognize who's where and he's seeing a different number in a different position, it can obviously can be confusing for a young quarterback. So I think overall at this secondary, when you can start throwing guys out there and you don't have some huge drop off, you don't have to worry about, well, he can't guard deep or he can't guard short. You have to kind of protect it. I think I'm not saying they go straight like man up, but I think what you have here is you have guys that are more versatile, especially last year. I mean, we talked about it, just all the injuries, everything that happened, guys getting thrown in the fire. But all those guys that got thrown in the fire last year now have experience, now
Yep.
have a year of off season. They do have that. What is it? The pre-fall camp, the off season there, where they have
All the
about 16
OTAs.
practices.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're little OTAs, I guess, which you can call them now. So, um, with all the experience and everything they've went through, I think that's a group that can do more and they're not limited. So it's going to be interesting how it kind of all falls together. And especially when you get in October and you're like, all right, we can do this with this guy here and we can do this with this over here. I think that's going to be a fun group to watch as the season goes on. Again, I definitely expect some bumps along the way, but I think that's a unit that's going to get really strong by the end of the year.
Biggest question mark for this side of the ball is what?
Linebackers. I think that's still an undersized unit compared to everything else. I know defensive lines are undersized, but I'd like to see linebackers get bigger. There is some young guys that can get bigger. I know Lee Koba is stout. He is a big
Yeah.
kid, but overall, would like to see this group bigger. I think that's your biggest concern is that second level, especially in the run game. Can they utilize their speed, athleticism, get around blocks, make sure they're not, once they hit them and they're not falling forward 2 or 3 yards. You got to stop them on the ground. So, are they attacking the downfield? Are they playing fast downhill? Are they getting in the backfield? I think that's the unit right now that I was concerned going into fall camp. It was defensive line. Still
Yep.
a concern because again, you just never know with practice how really what's going on there. So I think linebacker 100% is the biggest question mark going into the season.
I would agree with that, at least from a depth perspective. I feel like the defensive line's maybe a little bit more uh, from top to bottom, a little bit better pieced together. Last thing before we get out of here, what is a realistic expectation for Jordan Leslie's unit? I mean, we're talking 14 teams in the Big 12 now. If we're talking total defense, where can they kind of fit into the Big 12? Do you feel like they're a top half of the league defense?
Yeah, believe it or not, they were just outside the top half last year. As
Yeah,
bad as everybody said they were,
that's
they weren't
crazy.
as bad statistically. So, yeah, I think they can honestly finish top half out of problem. I think it's going to be a really improved unit because it's again last year they had to lean on guys early that just they weren't familiar with the system. They didn't have the same skill set as a lot of these kids do now. So when you get thrown in the mix right off the bat and you lose confidence, that's going to happen. So I worry with the linebackers there. that's my big concern. I worry that with the linebackers losing confidence in the run game and getting pushed around, because once you kind of get hit in the face there, all of a sudden you're playing on your heels, and that's not the unit you want to play on your heels. But I think overall, what they can do up front and what they can do in the back end, I think they have enough to finish in the top half.
I think they have the opportunity to. I don't know if they will. Um, it's going to be interesting to see. I think a lot of that depends
You
on.
also have to look at who they're playing. They're
Yeah,
not playing
yeah,
Baker.
yes,
They're not playing Baker Mayfield. They're not
yes.
playing high octane offenses either. So
They're missing
they
out
don't
on
have to play. They
this
don't have to play
offense.
the great Texas. Yeah, they don't have to play the great Texas. Is supposed to be so good this year. So
Yeah,
that matters.
no
Houston's probably going to put up points, but there's no Kansas State.
and oh, they don't have to play Kansas this year, but
All right.
I
And
mean,
Iowa State. I mean, it makes a difference when you're looking at the offenses they play and how West Virginia can attack them. I think they could be one. I don't want to say one of the better defense, just the top half of the defense. And to me, they have potential to be up there if the linebackers step up.
now that I think about it more with the schedule, yeah, I think that that's definitely feasible. So that's going to do it for our defensive preview. Hopefully, we covered everything for you. If you have any questions for us, make sure to just hit us up on Twitter at Mountaineers Now and drop a question for our mailbag next week. If you haven't checked it out, also we also did our offensive preview yesterday, which is also up on our site Mountaineers Now and on YouTube, which you need to subscribe to and hit that like button for on Mountaineers Now. We're going to get into our record predictions here soon. We're going to talk about the schedule a little bit, breaking that down from toughest opponents to easiest opponents, so on and so forth. Hey, we're getting close. We're 10 days away, or no, 9 days away now from kickoff in Happy Valley for the start of the season. So for Christopher Hall, I'm Schuyler Callihan. Thank you guys for watching Between the Ears, and we'll be back tomorrow morning with another episode.